Hi, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us tonight. First thing I want to say is Happy Mother's Day. Today is Mother's Day, and my lovely mom is here with me. So, hi, Mom, joining us from Costa Rica, which is great. So this is a chance to have a little bit of a talk back. This is a very interesting text. And we had a lot of great conversations when we were putting the show together. And one of the things that the students kept telling me was like how stimulating those conversations were. So we wanted to share that with the audience, and then also talk a little bit with Adam about his experience translating the text, and also talk a little bit about Sabina Berman's work, because even though she is incredibly well known in Latin America, her work might not be necessarily very well known for the Fresno audience. So before we get started, I want to take a second and do a little bit of a land acknowledgement. We are located in Fresno, California, in the Central Valley, which is the land of the Yokuts. And they're still here, right? This is their land, past, present, and future, and we honor their presence in this land and also all of the hard work that they've done to keep this land what it is. So I want to just get started, introduce our guest, which is Adam Versényi, and Adam is the chair of the Department of Dramatic Arts at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And he's also the dramaturg for Playmakers Repertory Theater Company. He's a theater scholar, a dramaturg, a critic, translator, and also a theater director, who is the author of Theater in Latin America, Religion, Politics, and Culture from Cortés to the 1980s, and also a translator of the work of Sabina Berman, The Agony of Ecstasy and Other Plays, and also Ramon Grifero, Your Desires in Fragments and Other Plays. Adam is also the creator and the current editor for The Mercurian, a journal of theater translation, which is an online journal. So we welcome Adam. Thank you for joining us today. So before we get started, if you don't mind, I just wanted the cast to maybe introduce themselves really quick so we know who they are, what role they were playing. And to make that a little bit easier for everybody, I'll just call on your names and then you can just go ahead and introduce yourself. So I'm gonna start with Diego.
Hi, my name is Diego and I played he in Pistol in the play.
Thank you. Amber, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. My name's Amber. I was the stage manager as well as the understudy for She in Mustache.
Mm-hmm. Josh?
Hello, everyone. My name is Joshua Clark, and I played the dentist in Teeth.
Emily?
Hi, everyone. My name's Emily, and I played the nurse in Teeth.
Juanita?
Hello, everyone. My name is Juanita Mendez, and I played the mouth in Teeth.
Alexis?
Hello, I'm Alexis Gonzalez. I played She in The Mustache.
Right, Grant?
Hello, everyone. My name's Grant, and I played the understudy for He in Mustache.
All right. Thank you, everybody. So let's get started. And the first thing I want to talk a little bit about is Sabina Berman in general. And so, Adam, tell us a little bit about how you became familiar with Berman's work, and how did that move into you translating her work?
Sure. First, however, let me just congratulate the cast. Really enjoyed the performance this afternoon. So thanks for all of your work. I actually first learned of Sabina when Diana Taylor asked me to translate The Agony of Ecstasy for a collection of Latin American women playwrights that never came to be. So that was my introduction to her, and I loved this play and went immediately looking for more of her work. And then ended up, so the Theater of Sabina Berman that is published with Southern Illinois University Press has her earliest 4 plays in it. Three of those won the Mexican National Theater Prize, which was unprecedented then, and I don't think anybody else has won that prize so many times since then.
Wow. And it's my understanding that the first 3 pieces were published first, right? And then the Teeth came later. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So there are actually 3, I believe, 3 different Spanish language publications of El Suplicio del Placer. The first one has the first 3 that you did. The second one has all 4 of them. And the third has Teeth, but not the mustache in it.
Yeah, and I got a hold of that one in Spanish, of the text in Spanish, and I was surprised that it didn't have the mustache.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the mustache is the piece that is probably had more written about it than anything else. But Teeth, and the reason that I didn't end up initially including it when we published the translations, Teeth was actually a commission by the National Dentists Association in Mexico. And Sabina wrote this wild little play and gave it to them, and they said, absolutely not.
Oh my God, that's incredible. Did not know that story. Wow, I'm amazed by that piece. To me, it speaks so much about just the long period of dictatorships in Latin America. Am I right to think about that? Or, because we thought about that, like how it seems like this mouth is being tortured, right? But then we also discussed with the cast a lot of, just the way in which women's bodies are treated in the medical world. And so, that was also a topic of discussion. And so I'm curious if you sense that there's a little bit of critique of authoritarian regimes in there, or was she just going for a critique of the medical world?
I mean, I think, all of what you're describing is part of that. It's certainly part of her work overall. Sabina is not only a playwright, but a screenwriter, a journalist, a poet, a novelist, a director, an actor herself. She did a collection of interviews of the 20 most prominent women in Mexico in about 2000 that won a big journalism prize in Mexico. When Vicente Fox won the presidency, and if you know anything about Mexican history, since the revolution in 1920, the Partido Institucionario Revolucionario, the PRI, the Institutional Revolutionary Party, I love that political party's name, had been in power since the revolution. And it was only in the early 1990s that the PAN, the Partido de Acción Nuevo, which was largely a conservative business party, won the presidency. And that was the first time it was not a pre-president. Wow. And Vicente Fox actually asked Sabina to become Minister of Culture in his administration until he discovered that she was pro-abortion and a feminist. And his conservative administration said, no, we don't want her here.
It's incredible that we still have those tensions, right?
Yeah, and if you look at her body of work, one of the things in plays like Puzzle or Heresy, Crisis, The Crack, La Grieta, one of the things that she is very interested in and attacks, critiques, is the historia oficial, the official story that a government, historians, politicians are constantly promulgating. If you know, there's a very famous Mexican anthropologist, Miguel León Portillo, who wrote a book called Visiones de los Vencidos, that's translated as The Broken Spears. And it's a book of original documents from the Aztec side describing the conquest. And the whole point there is that it's the victor who wrote history. And we write out all kinds of other narratives. So what Sabina does in a variety of her different plays and other works is interrogate that official story and show us different narratives.
Yeah. By the way, parentheses, I want to say that for my dissertation, I was writing about the official story in Costa Rica and precisely like trying to break that apart. And I want to say that your book on Cortés and theater in Latin America, starting from Cortés to the 80s, was absolutely seminal in my look at what was it that was going on, what is the official story, what is outside of that story. So just wanted you to know that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So one of the things that we also discussed, or that I see in this work that is fascinating to me, is that I think that she also brings a little bit of her feminist thought into the structure of these pieces. And so you see that they're not necessarily, well, some of them are climax driven, but not necessarily. And then there's also no resolution. It's not like the story gets resolved at the end, and right? And we put a period at the end of it. So I find that really interesting in that she's trying to really bring out, that feminist perspective in everything, not just in the content, but also the structure of the stories that she's telling us.
Well, and I think that's something that you see from an early play like this, all the way through much more recent plays like Molière or Happy 20th Century, Dr. Freud. They're all plays that have that sense of ambiguity to them, and that don't provide us with that, well-made play, tie everything up at the end of it, and send the audience home so that they don't have to think. She leaves you with a whole series of questions, and the play continues after the performance as a result.
Yeah. I'm curious if you know if has that been an issue in the way in which her work has been perceived by critics, or no, not necessarily?
Not to my knowledge, and there's been a lot of wonderful writing about Sabina Berman. Stuart Day, Jacqueline Bixler, Kirsten Nigro have all written articles and books about her work in particular. I think the thing that frustrates critics more than anything is the fact that Sabina has a habit of rewriting and republishing her plays and changing them. She doesn't consider anything to be done. So the play Yankee that's in my collection of translations was first done under the title Bill. Heresy that's in that collection, she then extended and retitled In the Garden of Earthly Delights. And she does this kind of thing. And I think, you know, we know in the theater that we could continue rehearsing endlessly. And she's a playwright who doesn't consider the play to be finished. She continues working, rewriting, rethinking.
Yeah, more like a practitioner, right? A practitioner of the theater. You're constantly doing that. That's really interesting. So maybe that's a great segue to talking a little bit about your process of translation. For us, it was just, we had so much fun, really, like talking about this place and the different layers of meaning. And so I'm curious, how was that for you in your job as a translator to make sure that you're capturing really what's supposed to be there? And, you know, there's always issues with translation, losing its meaning, not really conveying what it's trying to convey. So how was that experience for you?
Yeah, I mean, anybody who translates for the theater knows that you're translating much more than just the words. When I translate, I'm constantly putting on and taking off a series of hats. Translator as director, translator as designer, translator as actor, translator as dramaturg, translator as playwright. Because it's really about taking the work from its source and finding a cultural equivalent for it in the target culture that you're moving to. So for instance, I'm trying to remember, it must have been, again, maybe in the late 90s, I actually directed a staged reading of the Agony of Ecstasy for a conference in Cincinnati that was focused on Ibero-American women playwrights, playwrights from Spain and from Latin America. And Sabina was there at that conference, saw the staged reading. And afterwards, she came to me and she was talking about the Love Nest in particular. She said, you know, the US isn't an incredibly Catholic country in the way that Mexico is. And this was right around the time when there had been a whole series of scandals around these evangelical preachers, Jim Baker, et cetera. And she said, why don't you make the guy in the Love Nest one of those preachers? It'll speak to the Protestant context of the US. And my response to her at the time was, well, this is the first translation of your play in English in the US. What you're describing might be a marvelous thing for a director to do at some point in the future, but I think I've got a responsibility to translate the play as you wrote it so that whoever then picks it up really dives into your cultural context first before doing something different with it. And I mean, again, in that particular play, in The Love Nest, there were things like when he looks at the woman and starts singing, "Come on, baby, light my fire." In the original Spanish, it was a very popular Mexican love song from the period in which she wrote the play that simply would not have read for a US audience in any way. So those are the kinds of things that you have to take into consideration and think about. And then, it's often about, and if I can back up for a second, the reason that I started translating Latin American theater was that up until that point, the vast majority of Latin American plays that had been translated had been done by language and literature folks who knew a great deal about the context, but they were looking at it as literature, not as theater. And virtually none of those translations were playable. So as a theater translator, I'm constantly checking, and I don't consider any of my translations done at all until I've heard them in actors' mouths. Because you need to have a speakable language, you need to be thinking about the rhythm, the dialogue, the interaction. If it's just words on the page, it's not going to work.
Not enough. Absolutely not enough. Interesting. That's really, really, really cool. Let's see. Well, actually, I don't. Tell us a little bit about your other translations. I wasn't familiar with you translating Grifero's work, and now I'm all excited. I want to go find it and read it. Are you working on anything else?
So the latest thing that I've done is actually a translation of Ramon Grifero's little book of aesthetic theory and practical exercises called La Dramaturgia del Espacio, the dramaturgy of space. And that's in production right now with Bloomsbury Methuen, should be out at the end of this year, early next year. Yeah, I first met Ramon in 1991 when our former artistic director here at Playmakers, David Hammond, and I went on a USIA International Theater Institute tour. In 13 days, we went to Mexico City, Buenos Aires, Montevideo, and Santiago de Chile, meeting people in the theater, seeing shows. I think we saw 15 shows in 13 days. And in Santiago, I met Ramon. If you're not at all, Ramon, when the coup happened in Chile in '73, he was in his first year of university. During high school, He had actually run guns for the Mir, the revolutionary movement of the left. And when Pinochet came to power, an uncle of his in the army called Ramon into his office, handed him a plane ticket to London and said, leave or we're going to have to kill you. So he went and finished university at the University of Exeter in England, and then did graduate work at Louvain University in Brussels in Belgium. And in 1984, he returned to Santiago as an openly gay former revolutionary. And he founded a theater company called Teatro del Fin de Siglo, Theater for the End of the Century, and took over what had been the trolley workers' union hall in Santiago and turned it into El Trolley, which was a performance space. He kept it open. He tells this story about the secret police showing up one night and dragging him off to the men's room at El Trolley, which was where they would take you to beat you up and interrogate you. And they basically said to him, who are you? Because they were very used to, leftist artists who all grew their beards, wore berets, strummed guitars, looked like Che Guevara, and sang lousy protest songs. And here was this incredibly vibrant cultural space where he was programming performance art and punk rock, and they couldn't make heads or tail of it, and they ended up leaving him alone. But it became one of the most important sites of resistance to the Pinochet regime. So in 91, we were actually there right around the time of the no vote against Pinochet's constitution. And we met Ramon. I was so impressed with what he was doing at both El Trolley and with his theater company. Came back to the States, and about 4 or 5 years later, a fellow named Mark Masterson, who was then the artistic director of City Theater in Pittsburgh, went on to become artistic director of Actors Theater of Louisville and then of South Coast Rep, and he's left there. But Mark at City Theater had also gone on one of these USIA ITI trips and met Ramon. So he wanted to work with him. And we became, as I'm talking about all of this, it's just occurring to me that so much of my work in translating Latin American theater has come out of failed projects. The Diana Taylor anthology of women playwrights that never took off. And here, what Mark wanted to do, we put together a grant proposal for a production of one of the Spanish Golden Age playwright, Calderón de la Barca's plays that I was going to translate, and then Ramon would direct in his inimitable style. So that was my initial points of contact with Ramon. And then in 2011, my partner, Robin Kirk, who runs the Duke University Human Rights Center, and I were in the Southern Cone visiting sites of memory. And we were in Santiago, and I got in touch with Ramon. We all had dinner together. And as he was dropping us off at our hotel, he gave me a collection of 10 plays that he had published in Santiago. I read them on the plane flight home and immediately contacted him and asked if I could translate them. And that's where, that was the genesis of that collection, Your Desires and Fragments and other plays. And then in 2017, actually, one of my classmates from the dramaturgy program at Yale Drama, she now teaches at Ohio Northern University, where Joan does a biennial international theater festival. And she commissioned me to write what was then, or translate what was then Ramon's most recent play, which is a play called Prometheus, the Beginning. And then I started work on the dramaturgy of space. So,
and as a parenthesis for my students that might not be familiar with this, so you know, being a theater artist in Latin America was a incredibly risky profession in the second half of the 20th century, right? Precisely because of all of the authoritarian regimes. It is usually artists, the ones that are fighting for social change, and are usually the voice and the face of communities. And so they were the ones that were persecuted, tortured, exiled, etc. And I just want to mention very briefly that it's actually thanks to that theater in Costa Rica developed. Lots of artists from Chile and Argentina migrated to Costa Rica because Costa Rica doesn't have an army, so there's no political conflict in it. So many artists migrated to Costa Rica and they stay there and founded theater companies and started the whole movement of independent theaters that we now have in my country. Before they arrived there, there was really no real movement going on. So just a little parenthesis of history there of why this is so significant in the work that they do. Why is it so political, right? Why is it so hand in hand with the political atmosphere of the countries? So now I want to open it up and just I would like my students to kind of share a little bit about their experience working in this show. Anything that you feel comfortable sharing about the process, about those conversations that we had, about doing it for film, which is very different than doing it for theater. Does anybody want to open up and share anything about their experience? Diego, go for it.
I can go, yeah. So I was just gonna say, yeah, just keeping in mind of, yeah, hearing Adam talk about the how when he would translate, he has to keep in mind like all of the different, the actor, the director, all the different positions, and just, yeah, going back and thinking about like when we first started, it's almost like I kind of want to go and read, like if I wouldn't necessarily like, I don't know, read the Spanish version just to see like those like similarities or differences. But yeah, getting to do the pistol scene, it was just like the conversations we've said, like Gina's brought up that we had were just really engaging. Just getting to talk about and break it down, like the relationship between him and Maria, and like all the gaslighting that's going on, or is it not going on? Just getting to play that as an actor and getting to explore all the different possibilities of like, oh, it could be this, or like it could be this, was a lot of fun, like in the process. And then filming, like Gina said, was completely, that was like a new experience totally. So getting to actually watch like a filmed stage version was like, for me, I don't know, just getting to watch yourself on the stage was so like different and so unique. But I really enjoyed it, and it was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Diego. Josh, do you want to share a little bit about your experience playing the dentist?
Sure. Sorry, I was in the middle of drinking water.
Sorry, I put you on the spot.
No, you're good. So playing the dentist was very freeing. While freeing, also extremely fun. Kind of going back to keeping in mind, like Diego said, that this was all translated. I remember having the conversations because teeth is so out there and you feel like you're floating in it's just like a dentist chair floating in space. And you have to kind of orient yourself in the world with what you actually know. And I remember talking about like what I'm saying and what it's meaning, like in the very specific context, because if you just read it, it comes off as, it can come off a couple different ways. But as far as like actually understanding what I'm saying and why I'm saying it, was very interesting, especially when I thought about the fact that this was a translation. I think it was specifically something we talked about was in the nurse's monologue. It was everybody who has teeth can commit suicide. It was that idea, and like what do teeth represent here? And I remember talking about that with everyone on the crew and Emily, and it was extremely fun. Playing the dentist for me was, like I said, very freeing. Also, like like a little scary. A little for what I'm doing and what I need to like evoke for certain scenes. And extremely challenging, but in like a very good way.
Can I say something about the teeth scenes? First of all, I thought it was extremely effective on film. I was sitting there thinking, how in the heck do you do this if it wasn't on film? Because I thought it was really I thought it was very effective. I also thought that the reason you listened to what they had to say was that sadistic behavior that they had was so freaking underplayed that I started to sort of like them a little bit. I don't know what that's about. But I also have an experience where I was in a dental office for 8 hours one time, where I went to have a checkup in the morning at my dentist, and a tooth ruptured while she was cleaning my teeth. I was sent to then a dentist to get a root canal done. And they said, we can't save it. Your root is completely erupted and as if it's been eaten away, had no cavity in the tooth, no nothing. So then I had to go have this to another dentist to have the tooth pulled. And to this day, it was the most violent act I have ever had to deal with in my life. I was crying in the chair because of the fact it was as if they were crushing something and taking something from my body that was mine. And so I think I really related today to that, about what you were talking about earlier about the violence against women. And I thought, oh my God, I remember vividly how I felt that day and how violently I felt that I had been treated and could do nothing about it. I was trapped in that chair, and those dentists were doing that awful behavior. They weren't maybe quite as sadistic as these two, but they have to do their job. And I don't know, I just wanted to say that because I just watched it, and congratulations to every one of you. I'm very proud of you as the department chair, and thank you for your work on this. And I'll shut up.
Well,
Thank you, J. Daniel.
I mean, I think that that is one of the things about that particular piece, that we've all had that experience of being in the dentist's chair. I mean, as you were talking, Daniel, I was remembering when I had all 4 of my wisdom teeth removed under local anesthesia, and it kept wearing off. And my late wife was sitting out in the waiting room, hearing the noises that were coming out of my mouth as the dentist had to keep shooting me up with more Novocaine. One of the teeth had gotten embedded in the bone, and that was the reason that it took so long. But yeah, that there's something peculiarly violating about that relationship.
Yeah, it's actually quite traumatic. I can also think about one specific time that the dentist's hand was too big for my mouth. And so it was in a lot of pain. And my mom actually was outside of the dentist office, and there's a little window. And she said that she could see my feet going like this, you know, and she was like, what are they doing to her?
I have a friend that says only get female dentists because their hands are smaller. I'm not kidding.
Yeah,
I'm not kidding.
that is very true. Yep. Oh, well. So yeah, Juanita, you were the mouth. How was that experience for you?
Well, going into this, I was the understudy, so I had that in mind. And then when I remember you telling me in rehearsal, right before rehearsal, oh, you're the mouth now. And I'm like, okay, but I didn't really know what that meant. And then I didn't know what I was going to do. I'm like, okay, how is this going to work? But it turned out being really fun. And I know I didn't have any dialogue, but I really tried to think of how this patient would react coming into such an unknown. And I also kept on thinking, how desperate is this girl that she comes into this dentist out of all of the dentists, and she sees them and they're looking this crazy, but she decides to stay and she toughens it out. So yeah, it was a lot of fun, and a journey that I will never forget. It was amazing.
Well, she is quite high when she enters that dentist's office.
Yeah, and we did talk about that. We're like, is this all an hallucination, or is half of this true? You know, where is the line of what is going on in here? But it's part of that world. I think like a lot of what we see in, not just in that play, but also in Mustache and all of that, it's the psyche, right? Like how the psyche tortures these characters. So also in Mustache, you see that nightmare that she has, where she's looking for the nightingale and all of that, that is torturing their present time. So I find that fascinating.
And it's very much part of what we were talking about earlier, of that nature of mystery and ambiguity that is shot through all of Sabina's work, that then has absolutely an effect upon the dramatic action in each of the pieces.
I'm wondering if there's any questions from audience members, if anybody wants to ask anything or comment. This would be, we can open up for that now. Oop, you're muted, David.
I think, am I unmuted now?
Yes. Yeah.
I was wondering how you would present this if you were to do this on stage or somehow. One of the things that caught us off guard is we just kind of took this as this was a play and this is what you were offering from the university, and we didn't know all the background about what you're talking about now, and it threw us for a loop on several of the processes, especially teeth threw us, because we had none of that discussion that you have. I mean, I'm so glad that I'm at this talkback, because otherwise I would be bad-mouthing teeth up and down, because I didn't get the sense of the struggle or others. And I've spent a number of times in the dentist chair, but I guess I've had kinder dentists, but I thought it came across without the knowledge of a Halloween skit that was poorly done. So, I mean, it's, but now it's got a different angle to it, which I'm very grateful for. So I think somehow I don't always research the writers before I go to plays. And so that was what hit me.
Yeah, thank you for that comment, because I actually, as a director, I also thought about that a lot, in the sense that, you know, you need a little bit of context to be able to understand, especially being a translation and being situated in a different culture. So I did thought about that a lot, and was trying to circulate a few interviews that were done, you know, of the work out there, so that people can have a little bit of background before they sit into the play. But yeah, that is definitely one of the issues that you run into with translations, specifically when the work is situated in a specific culture, right? And not all of those elements of the culture necessarily translates as well. Thank you for that.
Well, and I also think that's probably the reason that the Dentists Association rejected the play. They couldn't envision it either.
Yeah, well, I myself was like, I can't, like, I was trying to imagine what that would look like in a stage, and if it was like a giant mouth, and if that mouth opened and closed, or if it was always open. Like I had such a hard time visualizing how that would look on a stage, but it was a lot easier to imagine for video. And you know, when I read it, I thought it was read for video, because it seems so videographic in nature. Yeah.
It has been done theatrically.
Mm-hmm. With a giant mouth on stage?
Yep.
Yeah. That'd be cool to see.
With that marvelous final scene of, you know, the dentist and the nurse dancing inside of the mouth before they're swallowed by it.
And then the mouth closes and swallows them. Yeah.
I have a question, Gina, and this is probably for you and the cast of Mustache. As I was watching that, I began to think about a lot of LGBTQ issues with that piece, and transgender types of, and I just wonder, and maybe Adam can talk to that as well, if because I don't know the political background of each of those pieces, but I know that I was going in a lot of different directions with that area of certainly in our modern day world, looking at that. And so I didn't know if those were conversations that the actors and you had, or Adam, if you have the history of maybe where that piece came from. Because it had a very, what's the word I'm looking for? A very contemporary slant to me, but done in a very abstract and absurdist kind of way. But I felt like it dealt with those issues. So just curious about that.
I'll just say one thing and then I'll pass it to Adam. For me, I think she was playing with gender trouble, right? And so it seems such an academic exercise in a way, right? I thought like, ooh, this makes a lot of sense, like in grad school, if you're like studying that text and then playing with this play, that made a lot of sense to me. And we discussed in our cast, you know, the performative issues that come into play on playing gender, right? And so she has a more masculine side, he has a more feminine side, all of those things we kind of discussed. But yeah, I think she was absolutely ahead of her time, and also in a very Catholic country, as we were talking about in the 70s, discussing these issues. Like it's fascinating.
Yeah, that play is from 1979. And it's probably had more critical ink spilt about it than anything else that she's ever written, because it, as Gina was saying, that particular piece was anthologized in a collection called Holy Terrors, that's focused on Latin American feminist writing. And she's very much interrogating what those gender roles are that of course has become so much a part of our contemporary discourse.
Mhm. Yeah, like he's apologizing all the time, right? The male character is apologizing all the time, and the female character has more control over the space. All of those things that we discussed and how they played into roles, depending on the role that they were playing. Well, I think we're approaching time, so I'm just curious if anybody else wanted to add anything. Christian, you joined us a little bit late. If you wanted to say anything, don't feel pressure, just mentioning. Same Alexis or Emily, if you all wanted to comment or anything, please feel free to.
Can I make one more comment, seeing no one else is? When I got back to Teeth, it made us at the end think of Audrey and the Little Shop of Horrors. So anyway, that was kind of a fun ending.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing this hour with us, talking a little bit about Sabina Berman's work and the Agony of Ecstasy very specifically. Thank you, Adam, for sharing this time with us. I'm looking forward to reading Ramón Grifero's acting book, actually, in Dramaturgia del Espacio.
Thanks to you all. You know, you put these things out there, and I started translating Latin American theater because it has, you know, I go to the theater to be surprised, and the only reason for me to translate something is that it brings something into our theatrical culture that wasn't there previously. So it's just a pleasure to see it come to life. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day and happy Mother's Day.